Welcome to this episode of COVID Special. In this episode, we are going to have a very wonderful conversation with Dr. Ashwini Nangia. He is a director of National Chemical Laboratory, a constituent of CSIR in Pune. We are going to talk in this episode about how that institution has taken upon itself a very major challenge in the time of pandemic and the post-pandemic world that is to emerge. Can we indigenize producing active key components for bulk drugs in India rather than waiting for it to be imported? This is the major challenge that they have taken up. Sir, thank you, sir, for being in the show. It's a very wonderful opportunity. It's a very trying time in India. We are facing this pandemic which is raging all over. The frontline workers are the medical workers. Administration is trying to do its best, but behind the scene, the science and technology has a very, very important role to play. And the Indian scientific institutions are gearing up itself. In some of these special episodes, we have been going around various institutions, how they have come up with innovative ideas to face the challenge and also the new world that will emerge post-pandemic. One major work that your institution has taken up is trying to indigenize key active components of bulk drugs. So what is your plan?
Thank you for the invitation to share some of the work that we have been doing in connection with the COVID pandemic from CSIR NCL Pune. We want all our viewers who are seeing this program to be safe wherever you are and be healthy. So I will begin from the period around end of March, early April, when our Honorable Science and Technology Minister Shri Harshvardhan ji, when he addressed the scientists, he told us very specifically that whatever solutions and medical devices and in new inventions that we are doing in the area of science and technology, specifically for COVID-19 solutions and treatment, they should keep in mind that they should reach the people while the pandemic is on so that it can benefit the patients and the people of the country. And I will just read out the quotation from him. And this was around early April. He said, scientists to hurry up and deliver, and he referred to this as a war, to deliver COVID-19 weapons before the war is over. So we have taken this very seriously at NCL, and therefore our strategy was to have both short and medium term projects, which will be possible to have an impact in terms of deliverables within the next 4 to 6 to 8 weeks. And around this time, if you recall, the Indian cabinet had approved a program for import mitigation of important drugs and pharmaceuticals, both the final drug products as well as their raw materials, which are referred to as drug intermediates or KSMs, key starting materials. And so CSIR NCL looked at the various, our scientists looked at the various projects which had been ongoing in NCL. And there was a list of 53 drugs, essential drugs announced by the government. And along with these drugs were also identified the key intermediates. Intermediates are nothing but like what we would call as hub molecules. By hub molecules, I mean from that molecule, you can go to various drugs within that class.
So it is something like, I mean, if I have to give a very everyday example, I mean, most of us might, for example, buy, let's say, idli batter from a shop. I mean, so it's an intermediate one. I mean, it is not the basic one like urd dal and etc. Not dosa or idli, but it's an intermediate one, and so we make it at our home the way we like it. You know, that's something like that, right?
To extend your analogy, we can make dosa with it, we can make vada with it, or we can also make idli with it. So that could be like your hub molecule. So those hub molecules are required in very large quantity. And what Indian industry, pharmaceutical industry has been doing it is for the last more than 2 decades, they have been largely importing these mostly from one country, which is China.
Uh-huh.
And so the dependence on one import, which is, always you would like to mitigate your supply chain across various sectors and geographies of the world. This
So
is
as
not
they
the
say, that
case.
you don't want to put all eggs in one basket. That's a important
Exactly.
point. Yeah, right.
So this is not the case for drugs and pharmaceuticals. So the government came out with not only a plan to set up parks where this indigenization can happen, but also certain incentives which were all laid out in the detailed roadmap which was put out by the government sometime in the first week of April.
Okay.
And so, and these drugs cover various categories from antibacterial to antimicrobial to antiviral, which is extremely important for COVID. And as we are now finding that even other drug classes, at antihypertensive and even simple drugs like aspirin, ibuprofen, metformin, because again, there is a comorbidity issue with those who have diabetes can have, greater likelihood of getting passed on with the viral infection. So these are all essential drugs and they are required in bulk quantity. And the objective was, can the key raw materials be manufactured in India? While the government, the Ministry of Pharmaceuticals and Chemicals is providing the overall infrastructure, the chemical process and the technology also is required to manufacture them. And this is where, NCL came in, and we identified 4 or 5 extremely key intermediates, as you just gave the example of, the idli batter. So like idli batter, one of them is a key raw material for paracetamol, which is para-aminophenol. So while paracetamol may be manufactured in India, the precursor to that, para-aminophenol, so these are not just required in drugs and pharmaceuticals, they are what we call as bulk or commodity chemicals. They are required in other areas of our daily life also, wherever chemicals come in. And these are typically imported from outside the country. So para-aminophenol is one. Then there is DCDA, dicyandiamide, which goes into metformin. And then there are other intermediates like CDA, which goes into gabapentin. And then there are indazole class of antifungal drugs, antibacterial drugs, and that has an intermediate called methyl nitroindazole. So like that, these are all key raw materials which are required upwards of 20,000 tons per annum by the pharmaceutical industry. So they are really what we would call as bulk chemicals. So what our scientists did, both from the organic chemistry division and the chemical engineering division, because this requires not just the chemical process, but also the scale up so that it can be manufactured on the kind of level which we are talking about, that is thousands of metric tons per annum. And of course, it should match the price. So it should be economically, environmentally, in terms of, what we call as carbon economy and carbon footprint. They should be compliant with today's both economic factors as well as environmental factors, and also supply.
So this economic factor is something that I just want a clarification. So as you rightly pointed out, for example, if we make some technology which is indigenous, that's nice. But if it is going to be very costly compared to your imports, the things are not going to be sustainable over a long term. So is the processes that your institution is developing is cost effective, is competitive?
That's a very good point. And before I answer that, I will just put one sort of statistic data to give the background. About 30 years ago, around 1990, which is, let's call that as the 0 point of liberalization for the Indian economy. Around 1990, more than 95% of manufacturing, and when I say manufacturing, I mean end to end, from starting material to the finished product.
So from urd dal to fried idli or dosa, everything
was done in India.
Okay.
We had the capability. We had the capability.
You're saying 95%. That was the situation.
More than 95%, including antibiotics, including fermentation routes, including biochemical routes, which are almost largely abandoned today, were done in India 30 years ago.
Okay.
And the reason they got phased out year on year is because of the factor you mentioned, that is competition in prices. because most of these chemicals, the economy comes A, from the infrastructure which is available to the manufacturers, and B, the scale. The price per ton would come down if you are making 50,000 metric tons per annum.
Okay.
Rather than if you are only making 10,000 tons per annum. So basically, as you go to what we call as the petrochemical scale, that is, 500,000 tons per annum.
Okay.
The cost per kilo or the cost per ton would be much lower than if you are only making for your own requirement. Let us take para-aminophenol. It may be required 20,000 tons. But if you make it only for the pharmaceutical sector,
then
your cost will be higher than if you were making on 5 times that scale.
Okay.
I think that's a no-brainer, because the more the scale, the lesser are your incidental costs, and you can also then adopt the latest technologies and the improvements that come with it. And what happened was, because manufacturing in China was happening on a much higher scale, and any company, whether it is buying a raw material, would like to look at the best price or the lowest price it can buy. So slowly this, phasing out happened, and the transition happened from more than 95% indigenous to, I would say, less than 30% today. More than 70% of what we call as APIs or API intermediates, drug intermediates, we call them KSM, key starting materials. They are today imported, and I think this has been talked about in several papers as well in the last 15, 20 days. And this transition back to where we were, as they say, to the status quo ante, will again cannot be done overnight, because you again need to build your infrastructure, that is those, technology parks and manufacturing hubs. B, you will have to now get a technology which is not 1990 technology, because it would not make any sense today. Our environmental bodies themselves will not clear that technology today. So you have to get 2020 technology, and that is where labs such as CSIR become very important, because CSIR has both scientific and industrial in their middle name. So they play a role in terms of feeding the technology to the Indian manufacturing companies, which will then bring them the infrastructure from the government side, the science from the CSIR, and together then the manufacturing can be taken up on the scale where it would be globally competitive today in India, so that we are self-reliant, Atmanirbhar, rather than having to depend on imports.
So short answers, like bullet points, so that our audience can get the sense of it. The government is looking at addressing about 54 essential drugs, right?
Yes.
So how many key ingredients your institution is working on?
We are working on about half a dozen of these. And since it is a hub and spoke kind of relationship between the intermediate and the final product, so I would say all put together, there are no more than 15 key intermediates. Those 15 key intermediates will give you about 60 APIs or 60 drugs.
So about 15 key ingredients, you are working on 12. So that's a huge one. Right?
We are working on a fraction of that, about a third of that, 5 to 6. And we are in a mature enough stage that we can discuss with industry, and we are doing that regularly with industries. Those who would want to now put up their units in these facilities which the government is going to create. So that there is synergy between the capability of manufacturing and the technology feeders which are needed to enable the industry.
And also, this may have another unintended side effect, in the sense that if our processes are much cheaper and you don't involve transport cost and things like that, perhaps even the drug prices can go low in India, right? Can fall. That will be a boon to the ordinary public, in a sense.
Although I think, to begin with, like in any enterprise, a certain degree of encouragement or incentives, as they say, will have to be given. But yes, over a longer period of time, in the next 5 years, 6 years, it's possible that actually we reap the benefits of this investment, and the price is not only lower but also in our control, rather than be depending on a supply chain which is outside the country.
Thank you. We will take a very short break here, and after the break, we'll continue this conversation of some of our other areas where you are working. For example, oxygen enrichment. and many other technologies that your institution is working. We'll take a very short break. Keep watching Eureka. After this break, this COVID special will continue. Welcome back to Eureka. We were having a very wonderful conversation with Dr. Ashwini Nangia. He is the director of National Chemical Laboratory, a premier institute in Pune, which is part of CSIR network of institutions. Before the break, he was explaining how India, which is the third largest in volume of drug manufacturing, is depending on supply chains from outside, particularly from one single source, mostly, and how their institution and other institutions in India are jointly working out to see whether many of them can be indigenized. Now, sir, can we move to another area that is your institution has also developed an indigenous swab, right, for
Yes.
PCR test, right? I mean, the COVID test. I mean, of course, it will not be only used for COVID test, but many other diseases also you need
Anything
that.
which requires, the throat,
Any
saliva,
respiratory,
either antigen
where you
test
need to
or
take.
even the
But in
RT-PCR.
COVID, it becomes very essential, very important, and world over, people are saying that this issue is not going to go away tomorrow. So, for a very long term, we need to be prepared for this particular disease and maybe many other things. So, can you tell us what's the core of that technology? What is it? What is its uniqueness?
Yes, these swabs are, I think we have seen pictures all over the newspaper. They are essentially what I would call the big brother of our, earbud tips. So essentially there is a stick, and on the stick, instead of both sides, which is in the earbud, this is only on one side, there is like a swab, and it is much longer than a normal, earbud, which we are used to seeing. It's about 12 to 15 centimeter, about half a foot in length. And it has a swab to collect the sample, which is the tip of the swab.
Okay.
And these swabs, as they are called NP swabs, because they go into the nasal and throat part, and they pick up. The idea is that they will absorb the sample from the body, then it will be pulled out, and once it is pulled out, then it is put in a viral medium, so that then the RT-PCR takes over. The RNA has to be using reverse transcriptase, has to become made into the DNA, and then the RT-PCR test goes on, which is not my area of expertise, but broadly I think we have all become, by reading the newspaper, we have become experts by just general knowledge reading. So our role was, we were actually flagged by both CSIR headquarters, Dr. Shekhar Mande, who in turn was in touch with Niti Aayog, Dr. Saraswat, and the overall supply chain in the country for the NP swabs, which again is almost 100% dependent on import. Although in this case, it's not from one country, but it is largely imported. And the reason is that the medical requirement in India prior to March of this year was probably at a level which didn't justify domestic manufacturers to take this up. It was probably required in a number that was meeting the requirement through imports, and there was I'm not speaking from a management or an economist point of view, but in general, the medical supply chain was being met, and it was largely dependent on imports. But suddenly, when you have a requirement which is 5 to 10 times of what was the case a year from this month in 2019, then you suddenly, and obviously there is a global shortage also, because all over the world this is needed. Testing is many times more than the number of patients, because you would like to cover the entire population as much as possible. In fact, Indian numbers per thousand is much lower than some other parts of the world. So to improve or increase the number of testing, the first thing is you need more swabs. And so the directive was, can these be manufactured in India? And so what NCL did was, as I said, it has a stick or a tip, which is made of a polymer, which is typically polypropylene, polystyrene, polyester, terephthalate, PET, which is kind of flexible but yet rigid. And the second part is the tip, which is either nylon or rayon. It is not cotton, but it is soft enough to go inside and not hurt you. It also has bristles because you would like maximum surface area to collect as much of the sample after it goes in. Because that's, again, what you would
the
want to
bristles
collect.
are very micro level, right? I mean, like a brush, it's a bristles are very micro level,
Yes,
so that the surface area can be increased. Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So they are micron size bristles of nylon or rayon, about 12 to 15 micron diameter. And there are hundreds of them on the tip, which is about, about this much, about an inch in length, 2.5 to 3 centimeters, and it is round. So imagine it is like a toothbrush, but a miniature toothbrush.
Yeah.
And while the stick is not a great technology, neither is the rayon. The real technology comes in aligning your fibers on the tip, which are micron size, so that they are all parallel. Or in other words, perpendicular to the stick, exactly like a toothbrush.
Yeah.
Because then they will cover, as you rightly said, maximum surface area when they have to collect the sample. And so main technology is what we call as, aligning those micro tips in a parallel fashion.
Okay.
And so there are three parts to it. One is the polymer composition. The other is the fiber composition, which is again another kind of chemical or polymer. And the third is the alignment, which is done using a machine to make them flocking, as they call it. The word is flocking. So by flocking, which is done using a machine, you get them to align, parallel to each other and perpendicular to the stick. The last part, of course, is having made it, because it has a medical application, it has to be sterilized and then sealed so that it remains sterilized till it is opened by the doctor at the patient site. So all these 5 steps require validation of the polymer, of the rayon or the nylon, of the sterilization method, and making sure that the sterilized packet is not cytotoxic, because if it retains certain cytotoxicity while collecting the sample, it will destroy the sample if it is cytotoxic. So all
these are all the key components in this technology, right? Yeah.
So we had to optimize A, B, C, D, and then give the optimal parameters in terms of overall package to the domestic manufacturers, and this is what NCL did between the month of May and June.
Very, very nice. So let me also ask you about this oxygen enrichment unit. I mean, one of the major problem when the disease progresses and the patient get into severe mode, one of the major problem is breathing problem and oxygen levels drop out. So ingestion of oxygen through artificial means is one important aspect. So what is this oxygen enrichment unit? How does it work? Where do you place it in our COVID war?
Yeah. Again, as we know that in a patient who is infected with coronavirus, the lungs are compromised first, and therefore the breathing, which is should have an oxygen level typically of more than 95% in a normal healthy person, starts dropping to 85%, and even it can go down to 70%, thereby requiring oxygen support. Now, in a normal hospital, there are oxygen cylinders. There is a bank of oxygen cylinders, which is more than 99% oxygen. And this is then supplied through the hospital network to the patient, whether they are in the room or they are in the ICU. Now, all this is fine, but as we have again seen in several newspapers, and in Pune, we read Mumbai newspapers, which was really high on the list in terms of number of patients anywhere in the country. There were frequent shortages of oxygen cylinders in many hospitals. The second is, what do you really need? A patient who is in the critical state certainly needs oxygen support in the hospital. But somebody who is at the moderate stage and at home need not build that entire infrastructure of oxygen cylinder, which is not only difficult to get, but is also hard to maintain in a house setting. So those who are at home and not in the critical state, but somewhere in the middle and require only medium level of oxygen support. Now, air oxygen, as we are, talking to each other and breathing, is about 21% oxygen. The rest is nitrogen and several other gases. So all of us, when we are healthy, normal, do breathe air, which is 21% oxygen. For somebody who is at the middle level, about 38 to 40% enriched oxygen suffices in a
You
home
don't
setting.
need actually 90% plus. You don't need actually 90%
You
plus.
don't need it. Exactly. So as I said,
Doubling the
what do you
oxygen level
really
in
need
air
for a
is enough.
moderate?
Yeah.
So this is where the NCL there is a startup company, Genrich Membranes,
Okay.
who have a technology for filtration and purification using hollow fiber membranes. So basically, they have membrane fibers which are like hollow fibers, and because of their hollow nature, they can separate and purify both gases and liquids.
Okay.
So this was put into place, and this has been there in NCL for quite some time between NCL and Genrich. They have a device which is called as Oxygen Enrichment Unit, OEU.
Okay.
And this is able to, by selective purification of oxygen, is able to enhance from 21% to double the value around 40%.
That's right. Okay. So this is something that one can use when you are in a moderate level, but not really in a very serious level. But many people are actually in only moderate level. They are not in
Correct.
serious level. So instead of deploying a ventilator, you can actually use something like this so that people
Absolutely.
yeah.
So
That's
people
that's
in home settings, people in remote areas, and urgently if somebody's level is becoming critical, at least you can provide this as a intermediate solution. The other advantage is because it is filtering. Sorry to interrupt. Because it is filtering the oxygen, the outflow which comes out is automatically purified by the bacteria and microbes and other viruses which may be floating in the air. So you not only get enriched oxygen, you also get pure hospital medical grade oxygen at 40%. But as we just discussed, it is enough for the medium level patients. So this is the
that's
oxygen
a very innovative thinking. I mean, instead of thinking in the laid path, I mean, alternatives needs to be evolved in this kind of a war. I mean,
Correct.
as you rightly pointed out, it's a war out there, and we need new weapons. This is a very interesting weapon. For want of time, we may have to end our conversation here. But
may I just add one, because the acknowledgement will be incomplete. This oxygen enrichment unit, of course, NCL had made a few prototypes, and there were two changes we had to make in order to get it acceptable and usable in the COVID setting. One was the flow rate of the oxygen, because in a normal situation, even those who need a support, the flow rate is between 1 to 5 liters per minute. But for COVID, we needed a higher flow rate. So we tied up with Bharat Electronics Limited, BEL, which is also in Pune, which is a enterprise which is into electronics and electrical items. And they have manufacturing capabilities which are not there in NCL, being a chemistry and chemical engineering laboratory. So we made the version 2, which is matching with what is required in the COVID emergency, at a higher flow rate, which can deliver oxygen at a higher flow rate of up to 8 to 10 liters per minute. And therefore the corresponding compressor unit also had to be refabricated and refitted into this unit, and it was made more compact. And the compact unit was tested at TUV Bangalore and certified so that it can be used in hospitals. And this has also been tested at Naidu Hospital in Pune, and we have feedback from some of the patients, and they have found that it is able to provide the relief to the intermediate category patients who are in need of oxygen support. So we would also like to acknowledge the very timely support we got from Genrich, which is the startup company from NCL, as well as from the BEL team in manufacturing the multiple prototype units so that they can be tested in various settings.
That's a very interesting point that you are pointing out. Like we started this conversation with the statement that there is a war out there where we have to defend our people. So we need new weapons. Maybe we are not warriors, the frontline warriors. They are there in hospitals and other places, but new weapons. They need to be armed. And an institution like this has been coming out with very excellent products, very excellent ideas, not only for short term, but also, as you rightly pointed out, short, medium term. So this is a very interesting point that we have had in this discussion. For want of time, we need to end this conversation here. But thank you for being in the show. It's a very, very wonderful opportunity for us. Thank you for watching the show. Keep watching Eureka. We'll come back with another interesting conversation next week, same time.